Sciences of UNISA, the respected colleagues from Nelson Mandela University, academic and the administrative guests and students that are joining us today for this summit. Also, the Executive Dean, Professor Nossi, and also my appreciated colleague, Dr. Chetty of the Academic Development Open Virtual Hub, who is the organizer of this event. So I would like to say that I'll give you some perspectives coming from Europe, where I am, but I invite us all to think and make reflections on what it would be like in the African contexts when we talk about AI, when we talk about ethics and regulations in terms of digital humanities. I would like to start by telling you a real story. This is a story that I took from my birth country, which is Brazil. And it is a story of the flower house, in Portuguese, a Casa da Flor. This house represents the transformation of nothingness into being. It has been built over several years by Mr. Joaquim Gabriel dos Santos. He was born in 1892 and he died in 1985. He built this house using pieces of broken tiles to decorate it and using light bulbs and materials that would be perhaps considered garbage nowadays. It's very common nowadays to make art out of materials that we don't value anymore. But at that time, it was not something very common to do. It took him over 15 years to decorate this house. And it's the voice and expression of the song of slaves through completely unusual means. It's the voice of the freedom that his parents did not have. It's also the legacy of those who fight for equity, for decolonization, for the social individual and their own history. Mr. Santos was clearly starting from a disadvantaged position, marked by poverty, scarcity, and illiteracy. However, he was filled with dreams, which are an expression of hope. Both dreams and hope are intangible matters. The House of the Flower may not fit into classical or contemporary architectural stereotypes. It's not a sharply defined understanding of a house as we know it, but it's a house, and being so, it challenges the value we attribute to things. The House of Flower puzzles us. Is it a slum? Is it a work of art? Or is it all of the previous? But why does it matter? Mosaic, flowers, sculptures, embroidery, Baroque architecture. This house is not only a house. It's a story made by thought and dream. Mr. Santos said, I did not learn from anyone. I did not go to school. I learned in the air. I learned from the wind. Against all the odds, he succeeded in building and decorating the flower house. Mr. Santos had one of the most important assets a person can possess, a strong mind. He believed in himself, he believed his principles, and he pursued his dream. He overcame the ideology that links poverty and race with limitations, scarcity, and the lack of voice. He challenged the dominant discourses in society. Mr. Santos is an example of what one can achieve with a strong sense of self, a deep desire to express what is valuable to them, and to challenge the status quo. His technology, fragments, creativity, and manual dexterity, and an unstoppable willingness to express himself, his soul, and his uniqueness as a human being. And Much like the flower house, the digital world is built on fragments of data, of algorithms, and filled with human decisions. In artificial intelligence, every line of code is a choice, every data set a foundation, and every model a reflection of human intention. But beyond the code, what is created, who owns it, and how it affects our society remain contested spaces. I think this is something for us to think about, how much we have agency over artificial intelligence, over the data that is in there, all the input and all the output, and what we do with the output from AI. And today, I propose that we explore these tensions in artificial intelligence through the lens of digital humanities and also through the lens of an ethical frame, using four dominant discourses that I chose specifically for this talk, because there are many other discourses, and these discourses interrelate with one another. But I chose the discourses of innovation, fear, opportunity, and ownership. So let's start to think about digital humanities within this discourse perspective in terms of ethics and also regulation. Now, perhaps it's important to think about digital humanities in relation to its power to break through the status quo, just like Mr. Santos did with the flower house, no? And to think of digital humanities as prompting lateral thinking, the kind of approach based on critical thinking that truly challenges our common understanding of things. Digital humanities is not a combination of antagonists or opposites. Technologies and humanities are not really opposites. Digital humanities is not an attempt to find a place for the humanities within the hard sciences. It's not either. Instead, it's the natural convergence of the flow of our inquiries, the flow of our desire to understand the world in a better way. So, digital humanities can be considered an interdisciplinary field. Some people prefer not to define digital humanities, but for the sake of this conversation, let's understand it as an interdisciplinary field that combines technology and humanities to analyze, to interpret, and preserve cultural, historical, and literary materials. It looks at how digital tools impact knowledge, impact society, through also the lens of ethics and our behavior. Digital humanities is beautiful because it's a home for various disciplines. To cite a few: archaeology, history, museum studies, philosophy, linguistics, education, you name it. But one thing that is interesting is that from all these disciplines, there are similar research interests that concern digital humanities. Now, I told you that I would frame this conversation with you today using four discourses. So we have to understand what I mean by discourse. And I mean that discourse is a social practice. It's not only what we say as in spoken words, it's more than that. Discourse is filled with ideology. Discourse is the way we understand the world and the way we act upon the world through our understanding of the world. So our practices, everything we do, is shaped by our way of thinking and by the way we talk about things. At the same time, they are shaped by the discourses of others. So it's not only what we think that matters, but all the input, the discourses that we receive from society, that we receive from others, also impact on the way we see and understand things, and how we are going to start returning to the world our understanding from our language and from our practices. These are the discourses we live by. There is no life outside discourse. They shape social practices and they are shaped by them. So there is a cyclical relationship between discourses and practice, and all discourses interrelate with one another. So why does it matter to us? Because when we are talking about digital artifacts, when we are talking about digital humanities or artificial intelligence or regulations or even technologies, all these fields are filled with different discourses and different understandings. Some of them seem to be antagonists, some other seem to go really well together, but it's by understanding the combination of these discourses, by having some critical thinking about these discourses, that we'll be able to understand these fields better. And one important thing to do is to try and mitigate bias. Then we can think of human intelligence and we can think of artificial intelligence. They are different things. And perhaps the main difference is that as humans, we are able to make decisions, we can use creativity. But how do we deal with our own biases? The discourses we live by. Are we aware of these discourses? Not only ours, our ideology, but the ones that come from society and that are really shaping our understanding of everything. So we do try to mitigate bias by reading more, by getting more knowledge somehow, by being educated on an individual level. Then on a societal level, we try and decentralize decisions. For instance, instead of having one politician, we have a parliament or a council, so that we have more decentralized decision-making structures. And by doing so, we try to mitigate the bias in our society. But it's difficult to achieve 100% bias-free, for example, artificial intelligence, because we do not have a bias-free society. But we have to be aware of that. So I propose for us to think of some questions. They will probably have no answers right now, but we can perhaps think about them over the course of the summit, in case we have not yet started doing so. So what guiding questions should we keep in mind and seek answers to in this context? For example, who has access to digital tools and who is left behind? Who is left behind? They do matter. Who decides what knowledge is preserved? How to ensure the preservation of indigenous knowledge? These are only a few questions out of many possible other important questions that we should be considering in the summit, and that we should carry with us throughout our lives to be able to understand better the world we live in. And this is really a call for constant critical thinking, for constant analyzing all these discourses. So, the framing of discourses. I chose 4 dominant discourses. I said there could be many others. But let's think of innovation, fear, opportunity, and ownership. The discourse of innovation is really strong in technology, in AI, and it seems to really to be a machine, pushing society forwards. Everything is about innovation in research, innovation in technology, innovation in everything. So why is innovation an interesting framing discourse to think about? Because it is everywhere. It's the type of affirmation that we hear at the very beginning of academic papers, policy documents, academic discussions on technology, in politics, in economics, and it is relevant. It is indeed relevant. It's a very relevant framing discourse. And what comes with it? Different perspectives on innovation. For example, the perspective of the summit is a very positive one. We are having the space here to discuss innovation with a positive frame of mind, understanding that the discussion on technological innovation within digital humanities can enrich African humanities scholarly work, can enrich our lives. For example, we can understand how important it is to engage with new technologies. For example, the metaverse. Some of us have never used or been in the metaverse before, so it's an opportunity. to experience technology so we can understand better our world, artificial intelligence, etc. And this summit gives us the opportunities to experience these technologies firsthand. I have just said the word opportunity, which is another framing discourse that I've just mentioned. And this shows how the discourses are intricate, they are interrelated, they are always relating with one another, because there is no standalone or pure discourses. They are always made of many others. So let's see how the discourse of innovation relate with other discourses, such as the discourse of fear, etc. When you think about innovation, it's important to say that the perspectives could be different. It could be seen as let's rush, because if we don't rush with innovation, we are going to be lagging behind. No? Or it could be let's look at innovation from a scientific and technological perspective, on a caring view for society, in a way of caring for society. And this is something that has been happening lately. We can find some policy papers that are embedding, the discourse of caring coming from innovation. And this is an important thing. So innovation is everywhere. So how can we pinpoint? How can we understand it? How does it relate to the discourse of fear? So, for example, let's look at this headline that the Google co-founder thinks Gemini employees should be working 60 hours a week. Now back to the office, not remotely anymore, according to a leaked internal memo. Now it's everywhere in the internet. And everybody says this is the recipe for burnout. Is it really possible that someone can work at least 60 hours a week? And then he says it's the sweet spot of productivity, in order not to let Google fall behind in relation to other big tech companies that are really developing and increasing their productivity in AI. Is it really fair? Is it really how we should be doing things? So sometimes this race for innovation can become, let's say, quite insane, and then there is also the danger of not considering the human being, or not doing innovation in such a way of thinking of the consequences. Am I really interpreting well the data I'm inputting into the large language models? Am I really giving opportunities for other cohorts of society to be represented in those data? Because if I'm only rushing, probably many things are left out. So this is something for us to consider in terms of the speed for technological advance, in terms of innovation. There are always pros and cons, no? So speed and real progress, we have to think about it. Is it real progress if we're not taking into consideration the humankind in the way we should, persons as human beings? Innovation today happens with this fast pace, but at lower pace, it's said, may hinder progress. However, excessive speed can make processes prone to mistakes. And we do have to consider them and pay attention to all these discourses that are around us all the time. Now, when you move to the discourse of fear, that could also be called the discourse of threat, yeah, we will see that there is fear everywhere when it comes to AI. No, people can be afraid of losing their jobs. There is a risk of exclusion, a fear of losing one's own cultural references and memories, fear of losing the registry, fear that the humanity will be extinct by uncontrollable AI that will be able to make decisions. And these are all fair concerns, no? But it's important to think that beyond fear, there is hope. Beyond fear, there is also opportunities. If we remember, all these discourses are intricate. And there's something else here that I find very powerful, which is this famous phrase of Michel Foucault, where there is power, there is resistance. And I would understand this as being empowered, because being empowered means to have power. When we understand what goes on around us through discourses, yeah, not only through what we read on the headlines or what we see on television, there are a number of things happening nowadays. When you actually stop and think more critically, we get empowered. And to have power means to be able to resist, and resist means to be able to question. Resistance means to be able to question. It's not only about physical resistance. So, resistance here can be seen in different ways. You may say, but I'm not the one responsible for the data sets in artificial intelligence. I'm not the one creating the codes and manipulating the algorithms. Can I have any possibility for resistance, for questioning? And this is where we differ from machines. This is where human intelligence differs from artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is logical, data-driven, statistical. But human intelligence is flexible, creative, and full of potential. This is where we have human agency. We may not always have control over the input, but we do have control over what we do with the output that we receive. What we do with the output that we receive. So, if you see a biased photograph or incorrect information about, for example, indigenous knowledge in Africa, know that through human agency, through critical thinking, you, on a personal level, can at least decide what to do with this incorrect output. Then, of course, it's not enough to change the system, but one person, yeah? But at a collective level, we can. But it does require effort. It does require education. It requires for people to be taught how to think. It does require some sort of competence to be able to question the results that we tend to take as universal just because they are produced by technology. And we should develop further cross-referencing skills. So this is one of the biggest challenges nowadays. It's always on the soft side, on the human side. But there are then opportunities, the third discourse that I mentioned, opportunities to reshape the social contract with and through AI via principles such as ethics and regulation through a humanistic approach. So this perspective is interdisciplinary and it's very powerful of digital humanities because it's the perspective of decolonization. This perspective is based on the opportunity to learn using new technologies and becoming a better person rather than being paralyzed by the fear of the rapid technological advance. I think that most of us, if not all of us, at some point have felt some sort of fear, some sort of thinking, oh my God, I really need to catch up. Things are moving really fast. And if I don't do that, I'll be falling behind. Yeah. It's not only the elderly nowadays that can follow behind with technology advancements. No, everyone, including the young people, can fall behind with understanding where technology is taking us. But most important is to do it by having a critical lens that digital humanities can offer us. So the other side of opportunities, the other side of fear is opportunity. Yeah. And AI can help revive, for example, endangered languages, enable scholars to collaborate across borders, and leverage technologies like AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, to immerse students in historical events. And these are fantastic achievements. This is a different way of learning. This is an important way of learning with and from technology. But how can we ensure that African digital humanities projects really benefit local communities rather than solely serving global institutions? Another question for us to think about through this summit. Now, I will come to a moment of talking about ethics and regulation from an European perspective. And I think it's interesting to think about it and see how it could apply to the African context. In Europe, there is the AI Act that you may already be familiar with. It was created, designed by the European Commission. It came into force at fall last year, 2024, and it establishes the first world's comprehensive legal framework for artificial intelligence because it really wants to promote trustworthy artificial intelligence in Europe. It goes about a risk-based approach that I'll show you in a minute, and it comes alongside many other packages, including grants, including funding, to have a full package for the development of AI, not only in terms of regulation, but in terms of practice. No? So it comes with the AI innovation package, the AI factories, and a coordinated plan on AI, all established by the Commission, which is the executive body of the European Union. The European Commission is responsible for overseeing the well-functioning of the Union, for fining, and for dealing with member states, making agreements to be respected. It's the executive body of the 27 member states of the European Union. And together, these efforts put towards the AI Act, they tend to bring a protection of the fundamental rights of people and a human-centered approach to artificial intelligence. So let's look at how it's done very briefly. It's a risk-based approach, and there are risks running from unacceptable risks, no, for example, social scoring, something dreadful, no? Biometric categorization, real-time facial recognition, all of these are banned in the AI Act. Then there are the considered practices that are high risk, such as using AI in hiring, because there's a real danger of exclusion. AI in education is considered of high risk, in healthcare, in law enforcement, and critical infrastructure. There are strict regulations in the AI Act. People can be fined. It's specifically for companies. Before it was for large companies. Nowadays it's for every companies, but they are requiring transparency and robustness in terms of AI in the regulation. Now, what is considered limited risks? Chatbots, AI-generated content, and there are some transparency rules that must be followed in the AI Act. And then there are the activities that are considered of minimal, no risk, such as spam filters, video games, and there are no specific restrictions, okay? Now, some considerations about the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. It's not focused on users. It's focused on the developers mostly. So there is a need for an education lens. We're just talking about humanities, the role of critical thinking, the role of understanding discourses. And we just said that AI is considered a high-risk activity in education. So there needs to be a lens directed to education in terms of AI. There are penalties for no compliancy. Companies violating the AI Act can be fined up to 35 million or 7% of their turnover. And the large models, not like ChatGPT, Gemini, they have stricter transparency requirements. And there must be a disclosure of the training data sources to prevent illegal content generation. Now, AI in education and employment. For example, AI used in schools, universities, and workplaces is classified as high risk because it affects people's rights and opportunities. There must be the possibility to ensure fairness, non-discrimination, and data protection. And there's also the risk of surveillance, no, through biometrics. So real biometric identification is banned, except for narrow security situations like counterterrorism, etc. Recognition in workplace and school is prohibited. So here we have the backbone. We have the backbone of the EU AI Act, and I just want to show you, just for the means of illustration, how the big tech companies are dealing with these fines. The fines are not coming only from the EU AI Act, but also from some national governments, some countries. You see, Amazon has paid the fine in 1 day. Apple in 7 days. Have a look here. Google, a 2 billion, nearly $3 billion fine in 16 days. So they really have no problem in paying fines. They make enough money to pay the fines and move on, without breaking down. So we really have to think what should come beyond fining. What can happen if we think of it on a more systematic level? And this is why education is really important. Now, just to continue, the Council of Europe has been focusing on education. You're talking about how the EU AI Act does not have a focus on education. The Council of Europe, based in Strasbourg, has been thinking of it. This is a photo that I took there. It has 46 member states, so it goes way beyond the 27 member states of the European Union. It does not include any African country, because African has their own regulation system. But it does have observer members, and I think it's Tunisia and Morocco. Okay, see, here you have the list. You can have access to the PowerPoint later. It's a human rights organization. It's not the European Commission, but it's a human rights organization. And they have created the Framework Convention. It was launched last year in September. Here's the link, the QR code for the full convention, in case you're interested to see. This convention provides regulation on a more soft basis, but let's say agreements, for countries that sign it, that they have to bind. It's binding, and they have to report on the progress over time, over a period of 2 years, I think. And it's interesting because once there are 5 countries that have signed it, the convention is in place, and the convention is already in place. The European Commission has signed as a party to this framework convention of the Council of Europe, on artificial intelligence. We focus on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. I also want to show you this publication that was recently published. I attended a workshop at the Council of Europe in the end of last year in Strasbourg, and this is the outcome of a working group that is looking into artificial intelligence and education with a critical view, thinking of the details of why regulation is needed, why regulation is necessary. And we can see that children and education are unique cases. Children's developmental needs and rights are different from the ones of adults. And at the same time, education as a formative element of human development has unique challenges and responsibilities. And this is why they say children and education are unique cases when it comes to AI and AI regulation. So we have to bear in mind, this is coming from the report of the conference. AI in education can amplify biases, breach privacy, promote poor teaching methods, and overlook children's developmental needs, leading to long-term harm. Strong child-focused regulations are essential. And AI use may widen the digital divide, disproportionately impacting marginalized groups and limiting access to education. Existing regulations are inadequate to deal with it. So these are all things that we need to think about. And maybe, these initial cases coming from Europe can inspire other countries to develop their own regulations and also work with one another, because we are living in an ever more global world. So some questions discussed at the conference are, for example, what are the benefits of a legal instrument at an European level? Or maybe, let's think, at an African level, that regulates the use of AI in education? What aspects should it take into account? How do national policies ensure that innovation education sector protects human rights, democracy, and the rule of law? And why are children considered unique cases? We have already discussed it. So we have here the Menti, we are not going to use the Menti today because I just don't want to move away from this presentation, but I had originally prepared it as a Mentimeter activity for interaction. But another question that we could think that was asked during the conference, and over 130 experts were there, and people had different opinions about it. So what do you think? What does it look like in the African context? Should an AI literacy framework for education be independent of existent digital competence frameworks? There are digital competence frameworks. Should it be different, or should it be an evolution of existing digital competence frameworks? No? And coming to the final discourse to finish my talk, we are talking about ownership now. No, ownership here, not really by thinking this is mine, I will make the most of money out of it and I don't give it to anyone. This is my data, this is my AI, no. It's more in terms of feeling that it's a co-ownership, the sharing of co-design of what's in the AI, the input and the output that we receive, as well as the regulations that we make out of them. So who owns AI generated content? In fact, there is the Data Act in the EU as well that deals with this question. No, who controls the data sets that train these models? Many AI systems are trained on copyright materials, indigenous knowledge, or personal data without consent. Should we be thinking about them? Now, ownership in terms of education, responsibility, and co-creation. I think that's where the answer lies. Education is the answer for many things. Responsibility and co-creation, understanding those rich discourses that we were talking about, no? Through human agency, a collective sense of ownership over AI systems and their outputs can be achieved, but we do need education playing an essential role. And final thoughts. Let's return to the flower house to close this talk. AI, like originally Casa da Flor, is built from fragments. Let's think about it. Data, algorithms, perceptions on ethics, and intentions. It can be a space of innovation and opportunity, but also one of fear and lack of sense of shared ownership. So, in my opinion, the future of AI in digital humanities is not just about technologies. It's about the kind of world we want to create. And much like Casa da Flor, the flower house, we must decide what stories we build with the pieces before us. Thank you. I'll finish here and I will let me know if I should stop sharing.